The call came on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after my homecoming ceremony. I was still in my kitchen, still adjusting to the sound of silence, no barracks, no boots on gravel, no 5 a.m. formations. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the coffee maker dripping. My phone buzzed on the counter. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Is this Captain Rachel Mercer?" I said yes. "This is Dan Holloway. I work with your husband at Whitmore and Associates. I know this is strange. I know you don't know me." He paused. "But I need you to come in. There's something you should see before you make any decisions about your future." I almost hung up. I almost laughed. Decisions about my future. I had just spent 14 months in Kandahar making decisions that affected other people's futures. I wasn't easily rattled, but something in his voice stopped me. Not panic, not drama, just the flat, steady tone of a man who had rehearsed this call a dozen times and was still not sure he was doing the right thing. I asked him how he got my number. "Your husband listed you as his emergency contact," he said. "I'm sorry. I really am. I wrote down the address. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my sister." I put on my jacket, got in my car, and drove 40 minutes north to a glass office building in Raleigh. I had never visited in 4 years of marriage. I should back up. My name is Rachel, and until 14 months ago I believed I had built, slowly and carefully, a life worth coming back to. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the daughter of a retired Army staff sergeant who coached Little League on weekends and cried exactly once at my grandmother's funeral, and a mother who taught 3rd grade for 31 years and still sent cards in the mail for every birthday she remembered, which was every single one. I was the kind of child who made lists, who finished what she started, who genuinely liked school, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted to know things. I got my commission through ROTC at NC State. I was 22 years old when I raised my right hand. I was 24 when I met my husband at a 4th of July party at a friend's house in Durham. He was tall and he laughed easily, and he asked questions about my work instead of changing the subject the way some men did, when they found out I outranked them in every room we walked into together. His name was Thomas. He worked in corporate financial consulting. He had a dog named Biscuit, and a standing Saturday morning basketball game, and a habit of leaving cabinet doors open that drove me mildly insane in a way that felt, for a long time, like the comfortable kind of insane. The kind you choose. We got married in September, 3 years after that party. Small ceremony, outdoor venue in the mountains near Asheville. My maid of honor, Sergeant First Class Dana Webb, wore her dress blues because I asked her to and because she never said no to me about anything important. My father walked me down the aisle and didn't cry, which meant he did everything right. I remember thinking, standing there in the September sun with the mountains behind us and Thomas's hands holding both of mine, that I had been careful, that I had chosen well, that this was the thing people meant when they talked about coming home. 7 months later, I deployed. It wasn't unexpected. I had known going into our marriage that another deployment was likely. Thomas knew it too. We talked about it before we got engaged. He said he understood what it meant to love someone in uniform. He said he was proud of me. I believed him. 14 months is a long time to be away. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. There were weeks when the communication was thin, a few texts, a short video call that kept freezing, a voice message I played 3 times just to hear something familiar. I won't tell you I wasn't lonely, because I was. But I also trusted. That's the thing people don't understand about military marriages if they haven't lived inside one. The trust isn't naive. It isn't blind. It's a decision you make every morning when you wake up 3 time zones away and choose to believe in the life you left behind. I made that decision every morning for 14 months. I came home in November. The ceremony was at Fort Bragg. My mother drove up from Fayetteville, and she stood in the crowd holding a small American flag, and when I walked toward her, she grabbed my face in both hands the way she had when I was 7 years old, and told me she was proud of me in a way that bypassed every defense I had, built in 14 months and went straight to the part of me that would always be her daughter first, and a soldier second. Thomas was there. He hugged me. He looked the same. We drove home and he had cleaned the house and bought groceries, and there was a card on the kitchen table that said, "Welcome home" in his handwriting. I thought, I was right to trust. I thought, I chose well. I thought about that card every day for the next 2 weeks, right up until Dan Holloway called me on a Tuesday morning and asked me to come see something before I made any decisions about my future. The Whitmore and Associates building had a lobby with marble floors and a security desk. Dan met me there. He was maybe 50, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the careful posture of a man carrying something heavy. He shook my hand with both of his. He didn't make small talk. He walked me to a conference room on the 4th floor and closed the door behind us. There was a laptop open on the table, a manila folder next to it. "I want you to know," he said, "that I argued with myself about this for 6 weeks. I have a daughter. She's about your age. She was in the Navy. 3 years. He straightened the folder, even though it was already straight. I kept thinking if it were her, I would want someone to tell her. I said, "Tell me what?" He opened the folder. The receipts were printed on plain white paper. Hotel stays, restaurant bills, a weekend reservation at a mountain resort in Boone, a spa charge I recognized because Thomas and I had been on a wait list for that same resort the year before our wedding and never ended up going. The dates went back 11 months. 11 months ago, I had been in Kandahar for 3 months. I was writing Thomas emails that started with, "I miss the way the house smells in the morning." I was carrying a photo of our wedding in the chest pocket of my uniform. I sat down. I don't remember deciding to sit. My legs just made the decision without consulting me. "How did you get these?" I asked. "He asked me to book them," Dan said. "He said he had a corporate card issue. He asked me to use mine, and he'd pay me back in cash. I didn't think anything of it the first time." He took off his reading glasses and set them on the table. The third time, I looked at the dates. He turned the laptop toward me. It was an email chain. Not hacked, not stolen. Thomas had forwarded a booking confirmation to Dan's work email by mistake, hitting reply all on a thread that included 2 other colleagues. Dan had been sitting on it for weeks, trying to decide what to do with it. I read the emails slowly. The name of the woman wasn't there, not in the ones Dan showed me, but the language was not the language of someone traveling for work. "Can't wait to see you. Same room as last time. Don't forget what you promised." The earliest booking was from 10 months into my deployment. 10 months in. I had 4 months left. I had been counting down. I stared at the laptop screen for a long time without speaking. Dan sat across from me and didn't try to fill the silence, which I was grateful for. I thought about the card on the kitchen table. "Welcome home" in his handwriting. I thought about him standing in the crowd at Fort Bragg. I had looked for his face specifically. I had found it and felt relief. I thought about the morning 2 weeks after I came back when I woke up before dawn out of habit, that old deployment reflex, and Thomas had reached over in the dark and put his hand on my shoulder without waking up, and I had thought, "This is why you do it. This is the thing you come back for." I asked Dan if I could have copies. He said he'd already made them for me. I drove home. I didn't cry in the car. I've never been a person who cries while driving. Too many years of learning to compartmentalize, to hold things until it was safe to put them down. I turned on the radio. A country station was playing something upbeat and completely inappropriate for the moment, and I let it play anyway, because the alternative was silence, and silence felt like it might have too much room in it. When I got home, Thomas was at work. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of me, and I didn't open it again. I already knew what was inside. I just sat there. In the house I had been picturing for 14 months, at the table where there had been a welcome home card 2 weeks ago, and I tried to figure out what I was feeling. It wasn't rage. That surprised me. I had expected rage. It was something quieter and worse than rage. It was the specific grief of realizing that something you carefully, deliberately built has been damaged from the inside, in the dark, while you were away doing something you believed in. It was the feeling of having trusted completely, and having that trust treated like a technicality. I called my mother. I want to be specific about what happened next because I think it matters. My mother is 63 years old. She taught 3rd grade for 31 years. She is 5'2" and she has never in her life raised her voice in anger, not at her students, not at my father, not at me. People sometimes mistake her quietness for softness. That is a mistake. I told her everything in one continuous phone call, sitting at the kitchen table, still in my jacket. When I finished, there was a long pause. She said, "Where are you right now?" I said, "Home." She said, "I'll be there in 2 hours." She arrived at 2:15 the afternoon with a bag of groceries, and the expression she gets when she has already decided what she thinks and is not interested in being talked out of it. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" She didn't say, "Have you considered his side?" She didn't say any of the things that people sometimes say when they want to manage your pain into a smaller, more comfortable shape. She unpacked the groceries. She made soup. She sat across from me and said, "You came home. That is what matters. You came home and you are here and you are going to decide what happens next, not him, not anyone else. You." I said I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. She said that was fine, that I didn't have to know tonight. I said I felt stupid. I said I felt like I should have seen it. She looked at me steadily and said, "You were serving your country in a combat zone. What you were doing was not naive. What he did was a choice. Those are two completely different things. Don't you dare confuse them." I have thought about those words many times since then. That evening, when Thomas came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the folder open in front of me. My mother was in the living room. I had asked her to stay. He came in through the garage door, like always. He set his keys on the counter, like always. He said my name, the way he always said it when he walked in, the automatic warmth of someone arriving home to a life they were comfortable in. Then he saw the folder. He stopped moving. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I had served 3 tours. I had learned a long time ago that the most effective thing you can do in a hard moment is stay very calm and very clear about what you know. I told him what I had. I told him where it came from. I told him the dates. He tried twice to speak. Both times he stopped. I asked him one question. "Was this going on before I deployed?" He said no. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "That's the only question I'm going to ask you tonight, because it's the only answer that still matters to me." I picked up the folder. I walked to the bedroom and I closed the door. The next morning, I called my JAG officer. I called a family law attorney in Raleigh. I called Dana, who had been my NCO for 2 years and who was the most practically competent person I had ever known. Dana drove down from Virginia Beach the next day with an overnight bag and the general attitude of someone who had come prepared to help dismantle and reconstruct whatever needed to be dismantled and reconstructed. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew me well enough not to. She asked what needed to happen first. That's the thing about people who serve. They don't ask if. They ask what next. In the weeks that followed, I learned that Thomas had met the woman at a work conference 8 months into my deployment. I learned this not from him, but from the attorney, through discovery. I learned that the resort in Boone, the one we had been on the wait list for, was where they had spent a long weekend in July while I was managing a supply crisis that had kept my unit up for 72 consecutive hours. I didn't tell Thomas that last part. There was nothing useful in telling him, but I thought about it privately, the way you think about the specific geometry of a thing that hurt you, not obsessively, just clearly, understanding exactly what the shape of it was. The divorce was filed in January. It was not contested. I would like to tell you that everything was easy after that, but I think you'd know I was lying. Some nights were hard. Some mornings I woke up and the first few seconds before full consciousness arrived were fine, and then everything settled back in, and it was not fine. I had a few weeks of bad sleep, not the deployment kind of bad sleep, which is alert and purposeful, but the other kind. The kind where your body is tired and your mind won't agree. But here's what I also had. I had my mother, who called every day at 8 a.m., and talked to me about her 3rd graders and her garden and her neighbor's new dog, and everything that was ordinary and continuing, and not about me, which was exactly what I needed. I had Dana, who sent me a text every Thursday morning that said only, "Still here," just those 2 words, every Thursday, for 4 months. I had the women in my unit, 3 of whom had gone through versions of similar things, not the same, but close enough, and who did not need me to explain or contextualize because they already understood the particular math of being gone and coming back and finding the arithmetic wrong. I had my work, which had never let me down, and I had something else, something I didn't expect. About 2 months after the papers were filed, I was contacted by the Veteran Outreach Coordinator at a community center in Fayetteville. They were building a new peer support program for women veterans, specifically women who had served in combat roles, who were navigating the transition back to civilian life. They wanted someone who could speak honestly about that experience. I said yes. The first session, I sat in a circle of 12 women in a rec room that smelled like coffee and institutional cleaning product, and I talked about coming home and finding out that what you came home to wasn't what you'd left, and that the only thing that had turned out to be exactly what I expected was the part where I had to figure out what came next. One of the women, a former Marine named Tess who had 2 tours in Iraq and a bone-dry sense of humor, said, "So basically you deployed, did your job, came home, handled your business, and started over." She paused. "That's literally just Tuesday." The room laughed. I laughed. I want to tell you about the day I knew I was going to be okay. Not as an ending, because it wasn't an ending. Things don't end. They change. They become other things, but as a moment I want to remember. It was a Saturday in April. I had been running again, the way I used to before my last deployment, and I was on a trail near my mother's house, the one that runs along the edge of a state park and comes out near a small reservoir. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of clear where the sky has a quality to it that makes everything underneath it feel slightly more defined than usual. I stopped at the reservoir. There were geese on the water. The light was doing something specific on the surface that I'm not going to try to describe too carefully, because some things are better as a feeling than as a sentence. I thought about Tess saying, "That's just Tuesday." I thought about my mother saying, "You came home. That is what matters." I thought about Dana's Thursday texts. "Still here." I thought about Dan Holloway sitting across a conference table from a woman he didn't know, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, saying, "I have a daughter. She's about your age." I stood at the reservoir for a while. Then I turned around and ran back. There is a bulletin board at the Veteran Center now. It went up in March. It has photographs on it, women in uniform, some in deployment gear, some in dress blues, some in civilian clothes at graduations and family barbecues, and the kinds of ordinary moments that don't look like anything important until you realize you could have missed them. My photo is on that board. It's a bad photo. Dana took it, and she has always been a terrible photographer, but it's there. Underneath each photograph, the coordinator asked us to write one sentence, whatever we wanted. Mine says, "I came home, and then I decided what home meant." If you're watching this and something in it sounds familiar, I want you to know something. Not as advice, not as a lesson, because I am not in a position to give you either of those things. Just as one person telling another person something true, the hardest part was not finding out. The hardest part was not the folder on the table or the attorney's office or the nights with bad sleep. The hardest part was the few weeks, right at the beginning, when I thought that what had happened was a verdict on my judgment. When I thought that trusting someone and being wrong about them meant I had done something careless. My mother was right. Those are 2 different things. Completely different things. You can trust completely and choose well, and still have someone else make a choice that undoes what you built. That is not a failure of your judgment. That is just the specific cruelty of it, that the best version of you, the most open and committed version of you, is exactly the version that can be hurt most directly, but it is not the last version of you. Before you go today, I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll tell me in the comments. It doesn't have to be anything big. Just let me know you're out there. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city, your state, wherever you are. I'll read everyone. And if you know someone who needed to hear any part of this today, a friend, a sister, someone you've been thinking about, share this with them. You never know which Tuesday they're having. I'll see you in the next one.